Hey guys, it's Austin here. This video is a comparison of both my trucks. This is something I've wanted to do for a long time, is compare a 7.3 to a Cummins and vice versa. This is I know, a very controversial and subjective subject. Everyone will have their own opinions, and I'm certainly not trying to start a war in the YouTube comment section. That's definitely not my intention at all. This video is just to give my honest opinions and thoughts of owning each, and how they compare, their pluses and minuses. They are both very different trucks. They are both diesels, but they're very different. They're built differently. They have completely different performance. The way they drive is different. So I want to go over all those little nuances and from my own perspective. First off, I should give a little rundown of the specs of each. The black one here is a 99 F250, the 7.3, and a ZF6 manual. And the blue one is a 98 12-valve Cummins. And this one is also a 6-speed as well. It has a G56 that's been swapped in it. So we'll first start off with the body of how they're both built structurally, the chassis, the body, how they're built. On the Ford, it's definitely built heavier. I would compare it like to a dump truck in comparison to the Dodge. You have to realize, at least the first generation Super Duty, it's not based on a 1500 series platform like the Dodge and the Chevy are. So take, for example, if you bought a 98 Dodge Ram 1500, it would be the same body, pretty much the same frame, same everything except from the motor and the trans and the suspension and rear end maybe, but it's the same truck as a 1500 aside from the drivetrain. Well, the Super Duty, it doesn't share very many parts with the F-150. The F-250 and F-350 are a different truck than the F-150. They're built heavier, they're built a lot bigger. They're just a heavier duty truck than the 1500, and that goes for the Chevys and GMCs too. It's the same. Their heavy duty line is the same as the 1500, which is unlike the Ford. And there's a reason why, and again, this video is very opinionated, why you see the Super Duty on construction sites and used by municipalities as fleet vehicles over Chevys and Dodges. I mean, you still see them, but I would say at least around here in the Pacific Northwest, all the government fleets and stuff for pickups, they all use Super Duties. So I want to go over some of the things on why the body, just to give you some examples of the body on the Ford that are built stronger. So we'll take for example the door panel. There's no squeaks or rattles in here. I mean, it's just a solid door panel. Now we'll go over to the Dodge, and I'll show you the comparison. With this, you hear that, and you see that flex. I mean, it's cheaper. It's not like the Ford. The Ford is just heavier. When you close the door on the Dodge, the whole body kind of, it kind of, you can see the vibration in it. When you close the door on the Ford, I mean, it's just a solid shut. You can't really see it, but on video, I'm sure. But you can you see it when you're in person. You shut the door, just the whole body, the mirror kind of vibrates a little bit. The hood is up, but the grill, it's just a, it's just a kind of a looser thing, I can just take my hand and kind of go like that with it. On the Ford, I mean, it's just a solid, it's not going anywhere. So those are just a few little things that you can see. The Ford is just a heavier built truck over the Dodge. The Ford also has less squeaks. I mean, both have a lot of miles on them, so they do have squeaks. The Ford has less squeaks inside than the Dodge. The Dodge squeaks, the door panels kind of Sometimes on a cold mornings is when it probably squeaks the most, when you go over bumps and stuff. On the Ford, it's just less so. Also, when people get in and out of these, like I have buddies that aren't vehicle enthusiasts like I am, and are so conscientious, excuse me, they're so careful of, you know, sliding in and, I don't know, you know, slamming doors and stuff. Well, on the Ford, I mean, it's just built so heavy. If one of my buddies just hops in it and doesn't care, you know, just slams the door, you know, whatever, the way that they're just sitting in it, you know, I know I'm not concerned at all that the truck's that he's gonna break anything. It's just a solid built truck. With the Dodge, you know, it's just lighter. The body of it is just a little lighter duty in that regard. Now the drivability, again, I have to give it some of this to the Ford. The brakes, it has 4-wheel disc brakes. The Dodge only has it in the front, drum in the rear. There's a huge difference in braking performance. The Ford is night and day over the Dodge. The performance of the brakes are excellent in the Ford. The Dodge does have a smoother, a little cushier ride, at least in the front, because its coilover. The Ford it has the leaves in the front, so it's bumpy. It's definitely a stiff ride. The Dodge is a little more luxurious in that sense. You also have to upgrade the steering components in the Dodge, at least on these second gens, do the steering box brace and upgrade some other things, because that Cummins, they didn't really upgrade some of the steering parts to hold up to that heavy engine. But the Ford, you don't run into those issues. Reliability, I mean, these P-pump Cummins and a mechanical Cummins and a 7.3, I mean, arguably these are a couple of the most reliable engines ever made. The 7.3 is electronic, and the 5.9, this one's a P-pump. It's not the 24 valve. Is mechanical. The 7.3, you can't compare these two new trucks. The new ones are much more complex, but for the sake of this video, the 7.3 is more complex. It has more wiring under the hood. We'll go look under the hood and I'll show you what I mean. You have wiring harnesses and sensors and stuff like that, and which you don't have on the mechanical 5.9. So there are some sensors, you know, on the 7.3 that are known to every once in a while go out, like the crank position sensor, the ICP. I've never had those go out on this, but a lot of people carry spares and things, so there's, you know, a few more things that could go wrong on that versus all mechanical. I mean, you look under here and you don't see wiring harnesses going to the engine and things like that. It's just all mechanical for the most part on this. Both are very reliable engines, though. I really haven't had many problems. The biggest thing with the 7.3, I did the injector cups. 3 of them cracked on a recent trip. That was a big job to replace those. You don't have that kind of thing with the 5.9 with these mechanical injection Cummins. So there's definitely less things that go wrong with the Cummins for sure over the 7.3. Is it like are you comparing a Cummins to a new 6.7 Powerstroke? Absolutely not. These two engines are very simple compared to the new ones. That's what I'm trying to get across. But if you're comparing the P-pump to the 7.3, yes, there's more things to go wrong in the 7.3 just because it is more complex. It has more wiring and things like that. Now performance, this is probably what you guys really came here for. It is the performance between the inline 6 of the Cummins and the V8 of the Powerstroke is completely different. The 5.9 has what feels like is a completely flat torque curve. So it doesn't matter what gear you're in. You can lug it, start it out too high of a gear, it doesn't complain. The engine just makes power everywhere, and that's starting from the idle to, you know, the rev limiter. It just makes power everywhere, starting from the bottom end. It's just a torque monster. So you never feel like you're out of a power band. You could have it in too high of a gear, too low of a gear. You just, you know, watch your EGTs. It really doesn't matter that much. It never complains. It never complains. It just goes. While this is totally not advisable, not something you do in the real world, the Cummins it feels like you could lug it down to an idle, because it just has that much torque. It never feels like it ever falls out of a certain power band. It just keeps going and going. It's pretty cool. It's almost kind of like you're driving a naturally aspirated engine, just because you never feel like you don't feel turbo lag that much, because it's just the engine itself is just so torquey. And this is just my opinion. You know, the inline six today, that's what you see in over the road commercial heavy duty trucks, semis, buses, garbage trucks, you name it. It's just a very efficient design. It makes power, it gets good fuel economy, it's easy to work on. So it's easy to see why the inline six diesel is so common in commercial duty trucks today over the V8 design. Also, driving the Cummins, it feels like it practically drives itself. You just shift the gears. You're barely on the throttle. Just for a normal driving, you just feel like you're shifting the gears for it, because again, that torque, it just pulls the truck. It feels like it has no restraints. It's just always going. It feels very free, in other words. So you just steer it, shift the gears, and hit the brakes for it. Starting out like on a hill with the trailer, I mean, it just lugs. It doesn't bog down. It just puts you back in the seat. Just shift it. The more weight on it that I found, and that goes really also for the Powerstroke too, but the more weight, the harder it pulls. It just loves having a load behind it. And you never have to wind it out, to get into a certain power band. Sometimes when I'm just driving it normally, I'll shift it, maybe a higher RPM. Then I go, why did I do that? I didn't need to do that, because I could have shifted at a lower RPM and it would have just been just fine. It's also fun to blip the throttle on the Cummins. I've noticed between all of them, the common rails, the mechanical ones, they are very, the throttle is very sensitive to the throttle blips. I mean, they're just really always ready to go. Maybe it's to do with the low end torque, but you can, even when like you blip the throttle to downshift, the truck, you can just feel the torque in neutral just kind of rock the truck a little bit, like you can on like a Triumph Rocket 3. If you rev the engine up, the whole bike kind of twists because it has so much torque. And that's kind of the same with the truck a little bit. The 7.3, we're going to talk about the performance of the 7.3. The power band this truly has a power band compared to what I talked about with the Cummins. The 7.3 doesn't start making power until around 1750 RPMs to 1800 RPMs. That's when it wakes up. I'm not saying it's because of turbo lag. It's because it just doesn't make power until that spot. So it's almost kind of like a switch, because anything below that, there's literally like no usable power. It's all in the mid-range and top end. So once you hit that around 1800 RPM, then all of a sudden you have all this power all the way up to the red line. That's where it makes power. So it's really a rever, the 7.3 is. If you can't short shift the 7.3, if you do that, it will hate you, it will complain, it will buck and kick and everything. If you try and shift out as first or in the second gear too early or second in the third, it won't like it. You'll put the pedal to the floor, there won't be any power. You can't, people talk about lugging the 7.3. I mean, if it's the EGTs are gonna go skyrocket, and you can't really lug at 7.3 because they just, for one, they don't make power down low, and if you are down there and you're towing, the EGTs are just gonna rise because you're not in boost. Towing trailers, in town there's no comparison, because the Cummins, it makes power from the start, from an idle. Well, with this, if you're not making power until around 1800 RPM, so that means all that time between idle, and both these trucks idle around 850 RPM, give or take a little bit. So that means between 1800 RPM and idle, there's no good usable power out of the 7.3. So when you're going from stoplight to stoplight towing a trailer, especially on hills, you have to rev the crap out of it. What feels like revving the crap out of it between gears, because that's how you make power. If you shift it below the power band, you don't make power. You're not going anywhere. So I don't like towing with a 7.3 in town, where you're starting and stopping on hills. It's just, to me, honestly, it's a stressful experience, just because you're always revving it way out. Some people like that, and that's okay. It's just not me. It's the same between a V-twin motorcycle and an inline. The inlines make all their power up top, and a lot of people like that. I just like the low end torque. And there's no right or wrong answer. It's just they both make power in different ways. The ZF6 also has a couple of large gaps between gears. So the second to third is a large gap. So you really have to rev it out in second to get a good spot when you reach third gear. And that's also the same between fourth, or rather, depending on how you're looking at the gear ratio, but fifth and sixth as well, it's kind of large. And again, with the Cummins, that's not a problem. It just makes power from the get-go. Now the highway is a completely different story, because when you're on the highway with the 7.3, your RPMs are in the power band, and it's absolutely a highway vehicle. This engine, towing, there's no complaints there towing. It has all the power you need when you're on the highway. When you're in the power band, the 7.3 makes all the power you need. I just want to give this quick story. I was following a 7.3 dually that was towing a big oversized load boat, and it had the oversized load flags and stickers on it. It was a really big boat going up the Siskiyous into California, and he was passing people. I couldn't believe it, in left and right. And so these 7.3s, they when they're on the highway in their power band, they tow awesome. A lot of people actually prefer the towing with the 7.3 than the 6-liter. And really, the only thing that would hold a 7.3 back towing on the highway would be your EGTs or just running out gear, running out RPM, really. And again, driving the 7.3 around town, it feels like you're always kind of being held back, because you're always revving it way out, and it does not have that free experience like the Cummins does, where I was saying you just shift the gears and once in a while hit the throttle. That's not at all what the 7.3 is when you drive around in town, because you're always in that throttle, always in that revving it out. So it's not, you're always having to pay attention to your tachometer and making sure you're shifting gears at the right time in the 7.3 when you're towing around town. This engine does not. With the exhaust of the 7.3, you hear that turbo. It's a very different sound. It's a burbly sound. It's it's a V8, so it's more rumbly. The inline six is very smooth. It's kind of like just like a roar sound. It's when I jump in the 7.3 after driving the Cummins a while, it's kind of fun just to have that more rumbly experience out of the sound of the Powerstroke. The 5.9, I've noticed it's just my own opinion. They just have so much. The exhaust has so much presence to them when you start them up. They just is kind of just a almost like earth shattering. Just whoa, when you start up the Cummins, you hear that exhaust. I compare the exhaust. The 7.3 sounds angrier, but the 5.9 it just sounds more maybe commanding. Like it has a real deep soul to it. I don't know. And again, people, if you see people, they hate the sound of the 7.3. It's all about the inline six, or they hate the sound of the inline six, and it's all about the V8. So you can't please everybody. Everyone has their own opinion. Now, modification. I first have to say, diesels were built to be workhorses, and both these engines do that admirably. You can't go wrong with either one as a workhorse. Now, to get performance out of them, it's much easier to do with the 5.9. They're just easier with the pumps on them. Very easy to turn up the power, but it costs more money to do that with at least with the 7.3, the HEUI system. It's the hydraulic electronic unit injection system of the 7.3. It's really the main hold limitation for adding big power. You can add dual high pressure oil systems. That's what you have to do when you want really big power. But it costs a lot of money to get into all that and do that. With the 7.3, the 5.9 parts are cheaper, injectors are cheaper. You also buy less of them as well. Also, the internal parts of the Cummins are stronger too. When you start getting more horsepower out of them, the internal parts like the crank and the rods, this one does have, since it's a 99, it does have the forged rods, but the later 7.3s didn't. These ones, they have stronger internal components, so you can turn up the power to the higher numbers without having to change those parts out so much like you do in the 7.3. In my personal opinion, if money was no object, the 7.3 would still not be my choice. Just my personal opinion, to turn into a hot rod over the Cummins, just because I'm not a huge fan of the power band of the 7.3. I just like the way the Cummins makes more power. But as a workhorse, I mean, the 7.3 day in, day out, just as a work truck, you can't beat that motor for that kind of work. In conclusion, they're both very different vehicles down even to the exhaust smell. The exhaust between the two even smells different. I described the exhaust of the 7.3 as almost like a barbecue-like smell versus the Cummins, which smells more like the typical dump truck, smoky dump truck that passes you by on the road. Again, as a work truck or a family vehicle, I would choose the Super Duty with the 7.3. It's just a heavier duty built truck, and again, as a workhorse, the 7.3 is excellent for that. Now, for a fun to drive personal vehicle that's more of a toy, for towing and things that you're not going to use as like a contractor vehicle, then the Cummins would definitely be the fun one to have. It's easy to turn into a hot rod, and it's just fun to drive. I would say between the two of them, it's just that are if you just want to go for a spirited drive, absolutely the Cummins. It has a lot of characteristic to it, it's just a lot of fun to drive. The Ford is a great truck to drive. It's absolutely great to drive, but it doesn't have performance. It doesn't feel like, oh, I want to hit the throttle, take this corner kind of fast or whatever. I mean, you're not going to be driving these like sports cars really, but I don't know. With this one, it's just more fun to drive, I guess, is for an enthusiast, just because of the performance. I don't know. You'd have to drive them both to see what I mean, but this one is more fun to drive as an enthusiast vehicle for sure. The Cummins is also easier to work on. Again, it's more of just I think more of an enthusiast route to go. And I say, take care of your equipment. I'm definitely not saying the Dodge truck is a weak truck or anything. A lot of people say that these have a 1,000,000-mile motor wrapped in a 10-cent wrapper or something like that. I've heard, or I've seen on forums or whatever. But these trucks aren't garbage. You have to take care of them. If you don't take care of a Ford, take care of this one, it's not going to hold up either. It's just all about how you take care of them. This one has over 200,000. And it's in great shape. Everything works. The AC works. All the power locks, windows, all that stuff works. It's in great shape. It wasn't the body of it. Just wasn't built as heavy duty as the Ford. That's all. But take care of your stuff, and it'll last. You just have to be mindful of it and take care of it. There's no right or wrong between either of these two trucks at all. Some people, I've thought about putting in a Cummins and the Ford, but to me, I would feel kind of shameful pulling a 7.3 out and putting a Cummins in. Now, if it was a 6-liter or 6.4, that would be a different story. But in this particular truck, I don't know, I just wouldn't do it, because the 7.3 is just such a great motor. I don't know, I wouldn't. It's just not my thing. I'd feel bad pulling out such a great motor and putting in a different one. But in a different one, yeah, maybe in the future, a newer 6.4 or something would be definitely an expensive project, but maybe a common rail Cummins and a 08 to 2010 Super Duty would be kind of cool. But let's start. I'll do actually a walk around first of both of these, and then we'll start them up. You can hear how they both sound. And this one is, again, it's a 98 12 valve with the rear opening doors. This was only made, I guess, for 3 months before they went to the 24 valve. It's originally an NV. It's a 5-speed original truck, but it's been converted to a G56 6-speed. I'll go over the performance upgrades in a different video, but as you can see, it does have compound turbos and does have bigger injectors and some other things too. This one has a 38R dual ball bearing turbo and a performance chip and a few other things. We'll start up the Ford first so you can hear it. The 7.3 sounds pretty angry. I've always liked the sound of these. I like the sound of both of them. Alright, we'll start up the Cummins. So in the comment section you'll have to say which one you like the sound of better. It'd be kind of interesting to hear, and also feel free to share what truck you like better. I just prefer it if you didn't start a war in the comment section. That's kind of ridiculous. There's no point in that. It's got bigger injectors, so definitely will blow more smoke. But as I said, it's in nice, good condition. It's a pretty rare truck. I like driving it. I like it a lot. So thanks for watching. I know this video is kind of long, but yeah, feel free to share your take on which truck you like better. And again, just would prefer it if you didn't start a war and say start accusing people of why they're wrong and stuff like that. I'm definitely not into that kind of thing. So again, thanks for watching. Thank you.